I spoke with Michael Maloney, founder of goldsilver.com. He recently created a video series, The Hidden Secrets of Money. And he did this to explain monetary history, wealth cycles, and the financial crisis. Now, the debt ceiling might have been temporarily raised, but it's an issue that's guaranteed to be revisited in just a few short months. So I first asked him about the very relevance of the debt ceiling, and here's what he said.
Well, it isn't relevant because we live in a world that is a debt-based monetary system. And when your currency supply is all owed back plus interest, and the currency to pay the interest does not exist yet, it means that you always have to go deeper in debt. The debt ceiling is an absurd notion in a monetary system that's debt-based.
And could you explain on the relevance of this? We actually have a clip from your video, and this is the latest installment that came out. And it has to do with, and it gives a great visual representation of the debt and currency side by side. Here it is.
So if we don't go deeper into debt every year, look what happens. The whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse under the weight of those payments.
Can you comment on this deflationary collapse? Why, and what are the mechanics of it? How does it actually happen?
Well, this is the problem with the debt-based monetary system. As long as you take on more debt, then you've got growth and you've got slightly positive inflation, and the whole thing works. But the problem is that the powers that be, the Federal Reserve, other central banks, they think that they can control this mechanism. But it's really controlled by how the public feels. If the public gets scared and stops going deeper into debt, borrowing and spending all of the time, then this whole thing goes into reverse. It goes into a deflationary collapse because the payments that you have to make on your car, on your home, and the payments that the public has to make through taxation to pay off the bonds that the Treasury issues to the Federal Reserve and to other entities, those payments don't stop. And so if you stop borrowing new currency into existence to replace the old currency that you're using to pay off the debt, the whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse, because in a debt-based monetary system, when you take a unit of currency and you pay a unit of debt, they annihilate each other on the balance sheet, on the books. And so that currency vanishes along with the debt. And so if the public doesn't always borrow more to cover the principal plus the interest that's owed on the currency supply, then the whole thing goes into a deflationary collapse.
And that's something that we certainly saw in 2008. The situation then wasn't necessarily as dire as certain people predicted. What are you seeing for the future in terms of another deflationary collapse? Will it be preceded by price inflation? How does this cycle work into your worldview at this point?
Well, actually, it is as dire as some people, as some of the people that predicted the worst. That is actually happening. If you look at some of the credit aggregates right now, they are collapsing, and the Federal Reserve is offsetting the collapse of those credit aggregates of the money supply with the creation of base money. But that base money doesn't all circulate. A lot of it just sits on the balance sheets of the banks because the Federal Reserve pays them interest to keep it there. The thing that people don't realize is the scale of the emergency that we are still in. The admission a month or so ago that the Federal Reserve cannot taper was an admission that the markets, that the entire country is addicted to this currency creation. And the scale of this emergency is mind-boggling. They are creating about $1 trillion every year, and they call it asset purchases, by the way. And an asset, when they purchase an asset with a check from nothing, when they're counterfeiting to purchase an asset, and it's private corporation purchasing an asset, that is immoral, that the Federal Reserve is able to go up and buy up our national debt and buy up a bunch of real estate with mortgage-backed securities and counterfeit to do it, and then we're on the hook to pay the tab with future taxation. But the emergency that we're in, you know, it took 200 years to go from no dollars in existence to $0.8 trillion of base money, and that's what existed in 2008 before the crisis. Now we print 1 trillion every year, or in other words, about 230 years worth of currency creation every single year, just to keep the markets afloat and to keep the economy afloat. If they stop, the whole thing collapses.
The $85 billion